You've not only said controversial things, but you've had a couple of attacks against the trans community, transphobic attacks.
So if the idea is that if I say a man is a man and a woman is a woman is inherently transphobic, that's not discrimination, that's disagreement. I will continue to maintain that gender dysphoria or gender identity disorder, whichever DSM you choose to use, is a mental illness.
Biological, but gender is a completely different thing.
No, gender is not disconnected from sex. So
it's not completely disconnected, but it's still a cultural thing. It's still from society.
Okay, no, it is not in the mind. Okay, you're not a man. How about the idea that if you're a woman, that you're at some sort of inherent disadvantage here in the United States? No, you're not. You're living in the freest, best place on earth in history for women at any time.
When Ben Shapiro enters the conversation, you know the status quo is about to be challenged. Get ready, because he's about to unleash a whirlwind of truth bombs, as today we prepared a juicy compilation of some of his most epic clips where he demolishes wokies. Let's get straight into it, starting off with a woman that tried to challenge him on transgenderism.
So, how do you say that some people don't have privilege when you basically just said that trans people aren't valid? They're not a thing. They're just girls pretending to be boys or boys pretending to be girls.
Okay. Oh, someone's excited. Okay.
Biological, but gender is a completely different thing.
No, gender is not disconnected from sex. So
it's not completely disconnected, but it's still a cultural thing. It's still from society.
Okay. No, it is not in the mind. Okay, you're not a man if you think you're a man. And I didn't say pretending, or if I did, I shouldn't have said pretending. Let me amend.
You said playing.
Okay, I said a boy who thinks he's a girl. That's the usual phraseology I use. Not playing. I usually say a boy who thinks he's a girl or a girl who thinks he's a boy, which is technically what we're talking about here. As far as the actual psychological issues at play, it used to be called gender dysphoria or gender identity disorder. Now they call it gender dysphoria. The idea that sex or gender are malleable is not true.
This is what happens when you reduce someone's identity to just a label. You lose sight of the real issues at play.
Okay, and I'm not denying your humanity if you're a transgender person. I am saying that you are not the sex to which you claim to be. You're still a human being, and you're a human being with an issue that I wish you Godspeed in dealing with in whatever way you see fit. But if you are going to dictate to me that I'm supposed to pretend that men are women and women are men, no. My answer is no. I'm not going to modify basic biology because it threatens your subjective sense of what you are.
Okay, but you're still saying these kids should not be accepted because they don't really fit in either place? They can't just
I'm saying that the Boy Scouts have a standard. You must be a biological boy to be a Boy Scout. You have to be a boy to be a Boy Scout.
Where's that written though? Okay.
In the name Boy Scouts. Because this is a very because for all of human history, boy meant boy and girl meant girl.
It's wild how straightforward biology can spark such heated debates.
Boy did not mean girl. And if I call you a moose, are you suddenly a moose? Okay, if I redefine our terms. No, yes, that's right. Men and women are a completely different thing. This is true. Have you ever met a man or a woman? They're completely different.
It's a completely different thing. You can't just say you're a cat. It's not a thing. It's genders. It's not saying you're.
Okay, why is that? I don't understand. Why? Okay, let me ask you this. Okay, I won't ask you how old. I will ask you how old you are. Okay, because you're young enough that it's probably not insulting to ask you. So.
I'm 22, so I'm probably young and naive, right?
No. Why aren't you 60? Why aren't you 60?
Because it.
And why can't you identify as 60? What is the problem with you identifying as 60?
That's a level of clarity that cuts right through the noise. Ben Shapiro is the incarnation of everybody's minds arguing in the shower. He never fails to deliver.
It's not the same as gender. You can't just.
You're right. Age is significantly less important than gender. You can't magically change your gender. You can't magically change your sex. You can't magically change your age.
You can still legally change it. People recognize.
You can't legally change your age, by the way.
Obviously, you can change your name, you can change your sex, you can change your identity.
Just because you can do things legally doesn't mean that they are correct biologically. You could do lots of things in the past that were incorrect biologically and correct legally. For a long period of time in the United States, sterilization of the mentally ill took place. That didn't make it okay. Skinner versus Oklahoma. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote the decision.
Right. I still don't understand why you're accepting these children that are.
It's not a matter of open-minded and accepting. I want them to get treatment that they see fit, but that's not involving me. The idea behind the transgender movement as a civil rights movement is the idea that all of their problems would just go away if I would pretend that they were the sex to which they claim to which they claim membership.
Ben's analogies are so on point, and he's so quick with it. His brain processes information so quickly, it's insane.
That's nonsense. The transgender suicide rate is 40%. It is 40%. And according to the Anderson School at UCLA, it makes no difference. There's a study that came out last year. It makes no difference, virtually no difference, statistically speaking, as to whether people recognize you as a transgender person or not, which suggests there's a very high comorbidity between transgenderism, whatever that mental state may be, and suicidality. That has nothing to do with how society treats you.
Do you think it could be because of they're bullied at school?
No, I don't think that. I do not think that the discrepancy. I do not think the discrepancy. First of all, I'm against bullying of any sort. Okay, the idea that somebody would beat somebody up is terrible. Okay, as somebody who's viciously bullied in high school, I'm not a fan of bullying. But the idea that the normal suicide rate across the United States is 4%. The suicide rate in the transgender community is 40%. The idea that 36% more transgender people are committing suicide because people are mean to them is ridiculous.
It's absolutely crazy the leap that these people make, trying to literally link misgendering someone to the high suicide rates, or to at the very least put a high responsibility on people doing that. Do you think heterosexual men would kill themselves if someone continued to call them a she/her? Imagine how ridiculous it would be to say something like that.
It's not true, and it's not backed by any science that anyone can cite. It is pure conjecture. In fact, it's not even true that bullying causes suicide, according to a lot of studies. For example, in the black community, where the idea is supposedly that America is a racist society, blacks are bullied a lot. Okay, in the black community has significantly lower suicide rates than in the white community. In fact, in third world countries, the suicide rate is significantly lower than in first world countries. Suicide actually seems to be a privilege of the upper classes, if you actually look at it from a financial perspective. So the idea that suicidality is directly a result of people like me saying, no, men are not women and women are not men, it's not true.
That was a savage takedown. Ben just delivered a masterclass in dismantling flawed arguments. Now here's to another example of Ben dueling another woman on the pressing matters that matter. Take a look at this.
So you've come out against the rioters in Charlottesville and all their violence and bigotry.
Yep.
The leaders of the Charlottesville rally were empowered by the rhetoric and agenda of Donald Trump and a lot of his associates as they've come out in the Vice documentary and claimed. You've not only said controversial things, but you've had a couple of attacks against the trans community, transphobic attacks, even your call for the transfer of Palestinians, which I don't know if you've redacted that.
Yeah, I redacted that like 9 years ago.
I just wanted to make sure. I wanted to ask you. No, I'm just learning about Ben.
No, really, that's fine.
Here.
That's fine.
But even with that, do you feel that a lot of your speech could incite the same kind of violence?
I mean, you heard my speech tonight. Do you feel that my speech could incite violence?
Well,
I mean that seriously. That's an honest question.
I know you're asking honestly. I feel that for me, as an individual, it isn't.
Spot on. It's like they're trying to draw parallels where there aren't any, hoping to create outrage.
But I could see how a lot of your points I really disagreed with. I literally have a list of
and that's
questions
fine. I mean, that's
you.
the good part, right? Where we disagree and we can have a conversation.
I just was wondering in terms of and what I mean by inciting violence is encouraging the same people who believe in like your transphobic beliefs, even that like homophobia is a sin based on your religious beliefs. Do you believe that because of what you say, you can encourage a lot of people to act on those beliefs?
So I have a very strong standard with regard to incitement, and I'm very consistent about this. If I'm not telling somebody to commit violence, I'm not inciting them to violence. I've held the standard for Barack Obama when he was saying anti-police things, and then somebody went and shot up some police officers in Dallas. I said that's not Barack Obama's fault. When a Bernie Sanders supporter went and shot up a congressional baseball game, I said that's not Bernie Sanders' fault because Bernie Sanders wasn't calling for that. Political debate requires that you talk to people and people take your words as what they mean.
Here's a cool map showing how press freedom reflects free speech around the world. The brighter the color, the better the situation. More than 50% of the territories in this world have serious issues with that. We've been really lucky to get born exactly in the lighter areas. We need to value that more.
I've never called for violence, nor would I. As far as the idea that my words are some sort of attack, a violent attack, for example, on folks who are transgender, my view.
I'm not saying
I know, but I'm responding to the people who are not you who might say that. Okay. So the idea that I am transphobic, for example, this is a bizarre kind of attack in the sense that I don't know that I've ever exhibited phobia of trans people. I'm not afraid of trans people.
Well, transphobia is more along the lines of prejudice against the trans
So I think
community
that
in terms of calling them
I
mentally
actually
ill.
think that your first characterization was right. I think that transphobia is really disagreement with the basic principle that the trans community is trying to purvey, which is that people's sex is malleable, that people can move from male to female, and that it is my job, objectively, to now call them the name they wish to be called, and to teach my children that men can be women and women can be men. I fundamentally disagree with that point. Now, with that said, is everybody in the United States entitled to the same rights? Of course.
This is a crucial distinction: fear versus disagreement. Glad he brought that up.
But your right does not extend to forcing me to call you what you want me to call you. That's not the way this works. That violates my freedom of speech. So in interpersonal relationships, if I were out to dinner with a trans person, would I make a point of noting their proper biological sex? No, because that would be impolite. When I'm talking about the general principle of is a man a woman or is a woman a man, the answer is I will say that a man is a man and a woman is a woman and a he is a he and a she is a she. And if I'm in a public debate with somebody, I will say the same thing.
I do want to clarify that when I meant, I wasn't trying to say disagreement. I was relating it to the same definition of homophobia, which is prejudice, or I tried to say discrimination.
Right. So I think that again, homophobia. There are some people who actively want to do violence to people who are gay. Right.
Interesting take on the balance between respect and freedom of speech. Though those leaning left are always overly sensitive to any criticism, and they love to find links between labels they can attack somebody with and what they say, even when the concern of the opposition is self-explanatory. Ben does a great job of pointing that out.
Right. I mean, those people are not me or anybody that I agree with, obviously. I've never, at any point in my entire career, ever advocated violence, God forbid, against anybody in a civilized society. That's not something that I believe in, and I think it's evil. As far as I think, again, your original definition of transphobia actually is better applied here as well. I think it's disagreement with certain principles that the homosexual community wishes to espouse.
What I was saying was that's not what I was. Instead
I know,
of saying
I'm saying that I agree with your original definition and not your definition. So the definition that you made.
No, I'm not saying it's mine. It's one that I Googled that I found.
Right. So, and I think that definition is wrong, and I think that the one that you Freudian slipped was right. Is what I'm saying.
So I'm saying based on the institution of, I don't want to say the institution of Google because that's an extremely general thing to say.
Love it. Something that leftists are allergic to: depth of conversation. They always use that idea when it benefits them, but when it doesn't, they resort to simplifying it and labeling someone with one of the phobias.
Do you feel like even though you're disagreeing with transphobia, with the trans community, which I believe we all have our own disagreements, I'm asking, do you feel that the fact that with your disagreement, you're inherently, through the institutions that have provided these definitions, discriminating against trans community?
And
thus encouraging other people to follow.
So
I know
here's
it's a long question, but I had to encapsulate a lot of things.
So here's what I'm saying. I disagree with either their definition is wrong or it's overly broad in its application.
Okay.
So if the idea is that if I say a man is a man and a woman is a woman is inherently transphobic, that's not discrimination, that's disagreement. If they say that's discrimination, they're overly applying their own label.
I think when you say they're mentally ill, that gives off.
I have said, and I will continue to maintain, that gender dysphoria or gender identity disorder, whichever DSM you choose to use, is a mental illness.
Dysphoria has been on the rise for quite a bit, and wokies try to equate that fact being the result of society becoming more acceptful of them, which could be the case. But one thing they'd probably hate to consider is how much of a factor does the simple idealization resulted from propaganda, that medical experiments can be the solution to some people with issues.
And again, God forbid that it should be said with any animus, because this is not said with animus. When people are suffering, these are clearly folks who are suffering. When people are suffering, you shouldn't be saying stuff with animus. I'm not saying that as a gotcha to people who are transgender. The point that I'm making is that when a society begins treating folks who have mental illness as though they are representing an objective reality, they are doing no service to the people who actually suffer from a mental illness. My grandfather suffered from schizophrenia, paranoid schizophrenia. He was institutionalized. If the doctors had said to him, Nate, you're fine. We believe that the radio is actually talking to you. That is not a service to him. That would have been terrible for him. Right? They put him in an institution. They gave him lithium, and it helped. Now, I'm not saying there's even a great solution for folks who have gender identity disorder or gender dysphoria, because the solutions that I've seen, including transgender surgery, are not intensely effective from all the studies that I've seen.
It's a delicate balance. Acknowledging mental health challenges without stigmatizing those who are struggling is crucial. Though the people on the left go crazy over this even at the smallest of implications.
It's a tragic, tragic situation, but the solution is not to redefine as a society what sex means along anti-biological lines. As far as the homophobia point, it's my own religious belief about the sinful nature of particular people's behavior should have no impact on how you act in a free country or how you think. It's a free country. Do what the hell you want. Right? There's religious ben, which is what I think is sinful, which is Jews who violate Sabbath, right? Jews who eat shellfish. Right? There's a lot of things that we think are sinful in Judaism. Right? And then there's the stuff where do what you want because it's a free country. I think people do a lot of sinful stuff all the time, and I'm not calling them on it. Right? I think the people who are living together outside of marriage are sinning according to my traditional religious beliefs. It's a free country. Do what you want. So when people say homophobia, I think what they are doing is saying you disagree with me.
Now take a look at what happens next.
Right? I don't want the government in the marriage business at all. So it's very. So I think that what bothers me is when folks assume that a disagreement means that they can ascribe animus, anger, hatred, wish for violence to me.
Which is what a lot of the Charlottesville rioters were doing.
Well, the Charlottesville rioters were garbage people. I mean, I did 2 full episodes on
Well,
how
I know.
garbage the Charlottesville
Yeah. I
rioters
mean,
were.
this has been really great, actually, to have this
Yeah.
dialogue. But I think what
I was the #1 target of the alt-right in 2016.
I wonder what his opinion is on gay marriage. Support for that has grown a lot, although it had its ups and downs due to how far peeps in this community are taking it. Though, you gotta appreciate how respectful that woman is. She understood that she probably doesn't stand a chance against a fast-thinking guy like Ben, and she decided to concede to some things as a way to show respect, even though she had her own identity of opinions. Huge kudos to her.
I don't know of any particular cases where someone has said, Ben Shapiro told me to literally go murder a trans person, or someone who...
And if they did, they would be lying.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to ask you about...
Right, and if they did, they would be
encouraging of the
lying, and I would
similar
think that, and again, anybody who commits acts of violence or evil in my name is a violent, evil person.
Okay.
And I hold that standard for everyone. But I really appreciate you coming out.
Thank
It really
you.
means a lot to me. Thank you.
Right? It's all about personal accountability. If someone's using your name to justify bad actions, that's on them, not you. Okay, now let's move on to another funny clip of Benny confronting the wokies.
Do you think that women who voted for Hillary, women who have strongly supported the feminist movement and supported the left, are feeling disenfranchised given the current climate of sexual brutality and oppression brought to light in Hollywood recently?
No, I think they're just going to blame the same people they always blame because we're all in our own little bubbles. Should they feel disenfranchised? 100%. Because in a society that treats sex as transactional, in a society that basically reduces sex to any sort, just a physical transaction that is based solely on consent, it makes it very difficult to explain why it is that the casting couch in Hollywood is bad per se. Right? There's actually, feminist theory says that it's bad because of power imbalances, but the sort of libertarian culture of the left suggests that power imbalance doesn't have anything to do with it. If I feel like trading my body for a part in a movie, well, that's my business. And if you say differently, then you're slut-shaming me. Right? So that's, well, you can't really have it both ways. Either it's bad or it's not bad.
So many contradictions. It's as if this movement's primary aim is to give as much authority with as little responsibility as possible.
First thing that I hate today is this insane piece by some crazy person named Jodi Allard. She's apparently a feminist blogger. First of all feminist bloggers are, I don't mean to generalize, but they're all crazy. So she actually has a piece today called, the title of it is, "I'm done pretending men are safe, even my sons." Really. And the entire thing is about how her sons are potential rapists. She says, "I have 2 sons. They're strong and compassionate, the kind of boys other parents are glad to meet when their daughters bring them home for dinner. They are good boys in the ways good boys are, but they are not safe boys. I'm starting to believe there's no such thing." She is talking about her own children being potential rapists because of rape culture. I have a general recommendation. If you believe that all men or all women are crazy, that everybody's terrible, maybe it's just you. Maybe it's just you. If every relationship you've ever had has gone bad, maybe it's not because all the people you know are terrible. Maybe you suck as a human. Okay, and I'm going to go with that on this one. She says,
Our grape stats are abnormally high compared to some other European countries, which is why it's good that you still live in America and not the Middle East, and you have strong protections. Though, one argument that feminists would hate to consider is how the impact that the destruction of the nuclear family had on drastically catapulting rape stats into the stratosphere. In many aspects, they have done themselves dirty.
My sons won't rape unconscious women behind a dumpster, and neither will most of the progressive men I know. But what all of these men share in common, even my sons, is a relentless questioning and disbelief of the female experience. I didn't realize the common female experience was to be raped while unconscious behind a dumpster.
Okay, Benny said that here just for comedic effect, but it was a little bit of a straw man. The woman was really trying to say that the way men view women and the world can also be used by grapists to justify their actions. The feminist was connecting the everyday mindset of men to the way grapists think, which you could argue, but it feels a bit too cynical. Especially since we're talking about one of the most progressive countries, which has done a lot to protect women's safety.
I know a few females, and I don't know any of them who've been raped while unconscious behind a dumpster, at least none who have told me about it. And if they did tell me about that, I would say, can we find the person and hunt them down? Like, that would be my first reaction. Can we tell the police? And if not, is there a way that we can kill this person and get away with it? Like, that seems like the best possible, like, is that not feminist enough? Do I have to do more than that? So I do not want to prove my pain or provide enough evidence to convince anyone that my trauma is merited. Okay, if you accuse someone of rape, you might have to provide evidence of actual rape. You shouldn't just be able to accuse anyone of any crime. Totally insane. Totally insane. Child Protective Services needs to show up, like, right now at this lady's door. Thank God it sounds like her sons are getting old enough that they get to leave home. Leave now. Leave now, okay? I will try to find a way to put you up in your own apartment.
That was funny. And I absolutely agree. These peeps try to sound profound while coming up with the most insane ideas imaginable.
So what you actually wrote is you wrote that Gorsuch, like Antonin Scalia, is a proponent of originalism, which means he believes a judge should attempt to interpret the words of the Constitution as they were understood at the time they were written. When the Constitution was written, women couldn't own property. In 1787, women didn't have the right to vote. It would be 133 years before women won that fight, a fight they fought for 72 years. Considering women had no rights when the Constitution was written and there was no mention of women in the Constitution, originalism is sexist. So let me ask you first to expand on that. Is it the Constitution that's sexist or originalism that's sexist, or both?
It seems that when it comes to women's rights, originalist perspective tends to side on the air of always looking backward and not looking at current day.
Because if you're looking, if I wrote a piece of legislation 10 years ago and I said to you, okay, you and I write a piece of legislation today, right? And we use the language of today. We mean something by that language. In this conversation, somebody will read this 100 years from now, and we will have meant what we're saying to each other.
You can always find feminists trying to squeeze the sexism out of a rock. A rarity is the feminist that is reversed with her leaping accusations. Probably because most of them seriously believe that even biology itself is inherently sexist, and it's men's job to stop that from being the case.
That we understand what we're saying. If somebody wants to read what we're talking about today, and then it turns out that all the words that we're using now mean the reverse because things have changed, did our conversation mean the reverse of what it meant, or does it mean what we're talking about right now? Words have meaning at the time they are said, and to try and read new meanings into old words just because, quote-unquote, times have changed, you can end up with some really bizarre results. I mean, and the problem here is that, you may not like what Neil Gorsuch is trying to do, but at least it's a rule of interpretation. In the constitutional structure, what we've had is the Supreme Court very often reversing itself on the exact same language by using the sort of rules that you want. So, for example, in Plessy versus Ferguson, you had the Supreme Court say that the 14th Amendment did not apply to black people insofar as segregation was okay. And then 50 years after that, they say, no, it turns out the 14th Amendment actually meant that segregation is not okay anymore. Well, that's silly. I mean, it either meant one or it meant the other. It didn't mean two different things at the same time. One of those decisions is wrong and one of those decisions is right. That's true for every judicial decision.
There you go. Problem solved. Now here's to Benny tackling the two biggest feminist myths.
How about the idea that if you're a woman, that you're at some sort of inherent disadvantage here in the United States? No, you're not. You're living in the freest, best place on earth in history for women at any time. How about the wage gap? This idea that women are somehow victims in the United States of this horrible discrimination, this glass ceiling that hovers over them at all times, that only Hillary Clinton's face can break, right? The fact is that in 147 out of 150 of the biggest cities in the United States, women make 8% more than men if they are single and unmarried and have the same degrees. They earn more than men.
There you have it. It's as simple as that. Anyway, this is Ben Shapiro, but wait, the fun isn't over yet. If you like him, you're sure to enjoy Douglas, who boldly stated, "Woke people are stupid." And that's your spoiler alert. Be sure to watch the video that just popped up on the screen. It's going to be even more savage and brutal. We're looking forward to this one, and I'm sure we'll see you there. If you want to watch more content of wokies getting destroyed with their own logic, then you can click on the pop-up on screen and we'll catch you in the next video. Peace.